Hey everyone, and welcome to the Kimberly Guilfoyle Show, live on Rumble, where facts come first and where news is done right. And today we are exposing even more massive abuse of power inside the FBI and how dark forces inside our own government are targeting those who dare to speak out, and shedding light on what the leadership doesn't want you to know. FBI whistleblower Garrett O'Boyle will be here just moments ahead to reveal even more shocking details. And plus, what about the media's role in continuing to deceive the American people with one hoax after another? Why are their ratings seeing such steep declines? Author, media critic, former CNN executive Steve Krakauer will be here to break it all down, and you don't want to miss it. So we lead off today with a look at how the two-tiered system of justice isn't just going after Donald Trump, isn't just targeting conservatives, but is targeting those who dare to call it out. Because FBI whistleblowers who testified before Congress last week say they were the victims of severe retaliation and smear campaigns for expressing deep concern over the politicization of the FBI. For example, suspended FBI agent Garrett O'Boyle from the Kansas City field office says he raised concerns about an FBI threat tag that was used to target pro-life Americans after the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision, and that it was only after he decided to speak out and become a whistleblower that he saw firsthand how government power can destroy your life. O'Boyle made protected disclosures to Congress, and then everything changed. And in September 2022, after he accepted a new role with the FBI halfway across the country in Virginia and moved his whole family, he said he was immediately suspended, had his assets frozen, and his family left homeless. And that's not all. He also says the FBI prevented him from retrieving his personal belongings that were in storage with a company contracted by the FBI Bureau. He spoke out, and the FBI tried to destroy his life. But despite all of this, he is still courageous and willing to speak out, and he is still standing strong. Take a look.
And disgusting as it is unsurprising. Despite our oath to uphold the Constitution, too many in the FBI aren't willing to sacrifice for the hard right over the easy wrong. They see what becomes of whistleblowers, how the FBI destroys their careers, suspends them under false pretenses, takes their security clearances and pay with no true options for real recourse or remedy. This is by design. It creates an Orwellian atmosphere that silences opposition and discussion. We know what is right to do, yet we too often refuse to do what is right because of the difficulty and suffering it incurs. I couldn't knowingly continue on this path silently without speaking out against the weaponization I witnessed, even if it meant losing my job, my career, my livelihood, my family's home, and now my anonymity.
And the worst part is that this behavior is coming from what was once seen as the premier law enforcement agency in the world. But now we have growing evidence that the FBI is just another example of the dangers of a weaponized bureaucracy. Because when abuse goes unchecked and when accountability disappears, it's the law-abiding citizens who suffer. But it's when the calls to silence you grow the loudest that you know you're over the target. Watch.
Do you think that solves being able to shine light on corruption, weaponization, any kind of misconduct that exists with the American people?
It doesn't solve it, but the FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. And we are all examples of that.
I can't think of a more sobering way to end a hearing.
Major moment. So moving. And by the way, Democrats loved so-called whistleblowers when they were attacking Donald Trump. Now, during the sham impeachment, whistleblowers were sacred. But when you blow the whistle on the FBI, you become the target of character assassinations and you have your life totally upended. Joining me now is a true hero and a courageous man, I call him Braveheart, is the whistleblower that you just saw in that clip. Former FBI Special Agent Garrett O'Boyle. Thank you so much for being on the program.
Really, thank you for having me on.
People want to know, your story. It's fascinating. A man of your character, integrity. You go to join the FBI. Tell us, how did you become an agent, and what was the thought process in getting involved with the agency to begin with?
So it was a long road. It was really a pipe dream early on. It was near the end of high school that I decided I wanted to go into law enforcement. And it all really started after 9/11. I was a freshman in high school back then. And then fast forward a little bit, and I end up joining the Army after high school and enlisted in the infantry, 2 deployments, 6 years total. And after that, I went back to school and shortly after that became a police officer. And while I was a cop, I finished my bachelor's degree and decided, because the FBI, it was one of these, Mount Everest type goals for anybody in the law enforcement field. And I decided, you know what, I have my bachelor's degree, I have all the credentials anyone could need to attempt to become a special agent. So I decided to apply, and it took about a year to get through the hiring process, and I shockingly was hired. And the idea behind it for me was that it has been, held up as this pinnacle, this beacon of fidelity, bravery, and integrity in an institution that is supposed to do the right thing in the right way, as the director likes to say. And so it was for a lot of those reasons, and of course, an innate desire to continue to serve my country that led me on that long journey, that long road to becoming a special agent.
You had these, idealistic in a really good way expectations and about wanting to continue to serve, your country as you did as, veteran and military law enforcement. How different was the expectation and the aspiration of what you had versus the reality of what you endured?
So especially now, it's a sad reality to see what the FBI has become. How instead of saying, "Hey, you know what? You have some valid points here about some of the things we're doing," they look at you as the enemy and they seek to destroy your life. I'm one example of many. There are many other whistleblowers who have been placed on a similar path. And in law enforcement, that's a body of evidence. That's not a coincidence. There are no coincidences when it comes to investigating crime. You have to take every piece of evidence and look at the totality of it. And in this era that we're living in, when you look at the totality of the circumstances regarding all of us whistleblowers, there's a huge body of evidence that retaliation is occurring.
Absolutely. It was such compelling, testimony that you gave in front of Congress, and as you see, it's been, played out over the media. One of the clips, that we played here. What it had to take a tremendous amount of, reflection and courage to be able to come forward. Can you lay out for us what prompted you to choose to speak out?
Honestly, for me, it boils down to my faith. So, of course, I'm loyal to this country. I swore that oath to the Constitution twice in the military, because I reenlisted one time, then as a police officer, and then when I was sworn in as an FBI agent. I take that oath very seriously, and I thought everyone else did as well. But my faith in Christ on top of it is what really led me down this path to see things that were wrong. And after I was suspended, the FBI gave me what they would call an opportunity to appeal their decision, and it was in written format. And one of the pieces I wrote in there comes from James 4, verses 17, which says, "For the person who knows the right thing to do and doesn't do it, for him it is sin." And that really was the crux of it for me. And I couldn't go on knowingly seeing these things that were wrong inside the agency, and just allowing them to continue when I knew that they were wrong. So I started making protected disclosures, and I really thought that I was going to be protected as federal law provides. Obviously, that hasn't been the case.
Very disappointing, but obviously, I see a very familiar, important theme is strength in Christ and your religious beliefs that guide you as a moral compass to do the right thing and have the courage in the face of great, adversity. So upon reflection, Garrett, what did you see inside the FBI that really shocked your conscience?
Kimberly, you started the segment with that Dobbs decision, that threat tag, that this is another interesting piece. So when I went to Washington, D.C. for my deposition back in February, I went there in good faith under the belief that it was confidential. And I was even told, don't talk about this with anybody unless it's a privileged party like your lawyer or your
Right.
wife or somebody in clergy. And I believe that that was going to be what happened. But similarly, as in the FBI, where I thought I was going to be protected for being a whistleblower, part of my closed door deposition testimony ended up being leaked and twisted and distorted as a further part of the weaponization of government against the American people. But that Dobbs decision threat tag, my first line supervisor was the first person who brought that to my attention. He brought it to my entire squad's attention, and he knew it was wrong. And he's the one who mentioned it and how the FBI was using that threat tag to target pro-life people instead of people who were actually targeting Supreme Court members. And so that's one of a number of things that has come out. And, it goes back to that point of seeing wrong inside the agency. My belief as an American and as an FBI agent, I thought if I was just a normal citizen, what would I want my FBI agents to do? Because I believe that FBI agents belong to the American people. And I thought I just would want them to do the right thing. And in an instance like that, when you see something that is clearly wrong, you have to make it known. Well, my supervisor wasn't willing to make it known, but I was. So I took it to Congress, and, it helped that, among other things, put me on this path where the FBI is now seeking to continue to destroy me and smear my name and, my family's life as well.
Talk to me about, kind of the FBI and the structure of it, because, I've been paying attention to all the testimony and whistleblowers that have come forward. But it seems there's a very, strong suggestion with factual evidence to back it up that the FBI actually has a corrupted incentive structure.
It certainly does. So I'll try not to get too nuanced, but there's a system in the FBI. It's basically a checkmark system, and it comes out in like an Excel spreadsheet, and it's mostly for the SES level, the senior executive staff level. And there's a litany of criteria on this list that an SAC, a special agent in charge of any given field office, if they complete these tasks throughout the year, they will get a monetary bonus at the end of the year. And so the ranking system is red, which is bad, and then green, which is you're meeting the standard, and then gold would be excelling. And so an SAC's primary goal, at least from my view, and I would say from the vast majority of FBI employees' view, the SAC tries to just get all the gold check marks, because then when that gets sent to headquarters at the end of the year, they can say, oh, look, my field office we got gold and everything, so now I get a monetary bonus. And in law enforcement, especially in the alleged land of the free, when we're operating in a system where you're getting a monetary bonus as if you're a Fortune 500 company for when you're supposed to be upholding the Constitution, that is contrary to everything I've ever learned in any constitutional law course, in any criminal law course. And so, yes, that's another example of how the agency has been weaponized against its own people.
Yeah, I mean, essentially you're saying that agents are incentivized to weaponize these threat tags and, like you've discussed and mentioned and in your testimony, and to open investigations, and there is a reward system for doing so.
That's correct.
How long has this been in place, and what do they do to actually dismantle this? Because it seems completely contrary to justice is blind and actually just only doing investigations for the fact that there is evidence and facts to support it versus financial incentives to support it and guide it.
Right. That's a great point. We're supposed to have blind justice in this country. Every single courthouse in our nation has Lady Justice either outside the front of it or in it somewhere. And she has a blindfold over her eyes because we are supposed to have an impartial system. But how do you have an impartial system when the senior ranking member of any field office is seeking to get that monetary bonus at the end of the year, So then, like any organization, it trickles downhill and pressure is exerted on the mid-level managers and then the first line supervisors and then down to the field level agents and other employees to try to accomplish those tasks just to get those gold check marks. I've compared it to a Minority Report before, where we're being distorted and twisted into becoming the thought police, and that is just completely contrary to a balanced justice system.
Tell us a little bit about the recruiting process. When people wonder, how does somebody get in? I remember back when I was in law school and being recruited at the time by the FBI, I decided to go ahead and accept a job at the San Francisco DA's office. But I wonder what it's like now and what it was like, for you, and how has that recruiting process and or the training changed?
So for me, the recruiting process, it was self-initiated by me. No one recruited me to any degree, but I know they do seek people with law degrees like you and accountants, and there's maybe one or two other career fields that are highly sought after. But the hiring process and the recruiting process overall, I thought was pretty stout. I mean, it took me just shy of a year to get through the whole thing. And I know many other people, it takes even longer than that. So it seems like there is a rigorous process to hire people, but it does raise some questions because the FBI is filled with a lot of people who I believe are there for the wrong reasons. They're there for the ego of it or the status.
Right.
And then, especially a lot of the people who seek to promote, there's just this sickening level of hubris. And many of them, I truly don't think even really care about the Constitution. They don't care about your rights. They only care about that next promotion and that next little widget that they can put inside their internal resume to say, see, look what I did in the past 6 months or whatever, so promote me again. And that type of system, especially for a law enforcement agency, I don't think is appropriate. And we have to figure out a way how to gut that and start over and really focus more on the character of the individuals that are being hired, and then certainly the character of those who are being promoted.
Yes, and to dismantle that incentivized program whereby if you open these investigations against people and use your power and authority to weaponize it against other people, then by then you get more money, you get promotion, you get advantages. That is deeply flawed. That should not be allowed whatsoever. I say this as a former prosecutor. That would be crazy. That's like I would get incentives if I was a prosecutor, and the more cases I filed or brought against certain people, like you say, the widgets that then are incorporated into your, employment profile and history. I can't even believe that is what exists right now.
Right. It really is shocking. And especially in this type of field, it's not like it's the Bureau of Land Management.
Right.
It's law enforcement. I mean, this is a sacred duty to our fellow citizens. And now it has been twisted and distorted to say, just meet these metrics and you'll get a bonus or you'll get promoted. And that's not how law is supposed to work in this country. You're supposed to seek after the facts and get as close to the truth as possible, and then let those facts decide. You're not supposed to try to twist them so you can get a FISA or a Title III or an arrest even. So
Right.
it needs to be entirely revamped and fixed. Otherwise, we're only going to be heading down a road that is a very scary one, because they can literally come after anybody and seek to meet those metrics along the way.
No, you're absolutely right. And just thinking about the Comeys and McCabe's of this world. But I want to talk about you and your family, because, when a man like yourself chooses to serve and chooses to serve again, and as you have in military and law enforcement, and then again, re-upping it with, the FBI, there's a family that makes that decision together. And there's a family that bears the burden and the toll of that service and of that dedication and that choice. Talk to us about the toll this has taken on your family, and how bad has this retaliation been?
It's been a tremendous toll. My wife and I have talked a lot over the last 8 months, and like I said earlier, I deployed to Iraq for a year. I went to Afghanistan for a year. I mentioned it in my testimony. I'm a recipient of the Combat Infantryman's Badge. When I got back from Afghanistan, I thought the hardest time of my life was over.
Was behind
And
you.
because I knew at that point that I would be uh, leaving the military, I had about 10, 11 months left. And so I really did think that I had done the hardest things I would ever do. And this time of life is harder. I know I'm not getting shot at anymore or anything like that. But I didn't swear that oath to have the government destroy my family. I touched on it in my testimony. I don't really care what they do to me. I've made that oath. I made that commitment in my mind that if I have to sacrifice my life for this country, I will. As a husband, the Bible commands me to love my wife as Christ loved the church. And Christ loved the church so much that he gave up his life for it. He was crucified for it. And I'm willing to do that for this country. I'm willing to die for my family. But I am not willing to see their lives and their dreams and their hopes destroyed by a weaponized government who is just simply seeking to silence dissent.
Absolutely. I think, your belief in Christ and love of your family, being such an honorable man, has really helped you, get through this. And, when you take a step back, Garrett, and you try and digest this moment and absorb it and process the moment you're in, is there a sense, what are the emotions going on with you? Is it anxiety? Is it fear? Is it also a sense of, empowerment for what you're doing and for standing up, for the country, for the citizens in this moment of time? And what does it all mean to you?
So there is a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear. I really think that now that I I testified publicly, I really think that the FBI is only going to increase the pressure to completely rid themselves of me. And I really think that that will be the case for anyone who has similar beliefs and a similar stance on where that agency should be heading. And but that being said, you know, I can only move forward. I didn't want this. I just wanted to serve my country and catch bad guys. And, you know, I never could have imagined in a million years that I would be testifying before Congress. I would have videos on YouTube and doing interviews with people like you. But I guess I'm also grateful for this opportunity because, like I said in my opening statement, here am I, send me. I've made that oath many times. I have to make that oath again. It's the only way. And I hope it encourages other people inside the FBI who are seeing the same type of things that I saw and that other whistleblowers saw. I hope they can see an interview like this and say, you know what? I have to stand up too. It's the only way to save our agency. It's the only way to save our country. And I truly believe that.
And save our souls.
Absolutely.
So if FBI Director Christopher Wray was sitting right here with you, what would you tell him or what would you ask him?
I would ask him why. Why has he allowed the agency to spiral into this death knell of weaponization against its own employees, against people the agency claims to protect? They're supposed to protect whistleblowers by the law. Part of the FBI's mission statement is to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Well, there are ratified laws to protect whistleblowers, and the FBI refuses to protect us. So I'd just ask him why he's allowing that to happen. And I honestly would really like to have a candid conversation with him to get to the bottom of it, because to me, it doesn't make any sense. In any organization, especially one like the FBI that is the pinnacle of law enforcement in the entire world, they should want to get better and improve. But it seems like they just want to brush it under the rug and say, there's nothing to see here. We're doing everything just right. And that's not how anybody is going to get better.
You're absolutely right. Why do you think the FBI is so resistant to reform? I mean, they're seeing this, overwhelming evidence in the form of whistleblowers like yourself, and come forward with the flaws, the problems. the complexities of what this organization has become?
I think it boils down to hubris, and they have bought the lie that the FBI is perfect, the FBI is beyond reproach, and they refuse to take that inward look and say, what are the things we're doing wrong? What are the things we can do better? What are the things that we have even instituted in policy or procedure that are way outside the bounds of a proper law enforcement agency? But they refuse to do that because they think the FBI is guiltless whenever any allegation is made against them.
I think hubris is a good word for it. Do you think that the FBI is beyond reform at this point? And if you don't think so, how would you, if you were asked, how would you reform it?
On my worst days, I say it has to be absolutely dismantled, completely abolished. And on my best days, I think there's a sliver of hope that it can be fixed, but it's a very tiny sliver, and that's on my best days. So, how to fix it? It's going to take a lot of hard work and effort and true introspection and true oversight as well. Members of Congress have mentioned appropriations and the power of the purse. I think that's a potential starting place, is removing some of that funding and saying, you know what, we need to take a second look before we increase your funding. I think the funding to the FBI increased about $1 billion this year alone. And it's kind of like a self-licking ice cream cone. They justify investigations and they justify statistics so they can then come to Congress and say, hey, look at all of the statistics that we drummed up. So we need more money this year. But those statistics don't really always tell the true story. And there really needs to be an investigation into a lot of these policies and procedures to find out how the FBI has really fallen off the rails as it has.
What would you say to some of the young, Garrett O'Boyles out there that they're thinking about joining the FBI, perhaps some that have served in the military faithfully, served in law enforcement, and are considering or thinking about this as a career path and a choice?
I would say if you truly meant your oath to the Constitution, don't work for the FBI, because you're bound to run into something that is not in alignment with that oath that you swore and with the knowledge you have about the Constitution and criminal law. And then if you speak up about it, you're going to get destroyed.
It's sobering, especially for those that have devoted so much of their life and their goodwill and their strength to serving the country, to having that expertise in the military or in law enforcement, that want to choose another path to continue that service and to find something that you looked up to and that you believed in, that you really admired in life, and see it in such disrepair and tarnished and with this level of dysfunction. I know it's very disheartening. Talk about the next steps for you as a man, as a husband, father, for you and your family.
Going forward, we're just taking it one step at a time, and that's pretty much what we've been doing for the last 8 months. There's been so much unknown with all of this, and now that I've testified, in many ways, there's far more unknown now, because I don't know the type of retaliation they're drumming up me even as we speak to try to continue to attempt to silence me. So we're going to take it one day at a time. There's been a tremendous amount of support since the hearing, and it's been encouraging, because we have felt alone and on an island for many, many months now. And if it wasn't for some of the other whistleblowers who I've been in touch with, and for my wife and my family, it would have been even harder. So one step at a time, we're going to continue this fight. I have a tremendous legal team who, honestly, without them, I wouldn't be here, and I wouldn't have had the courage and commitment to continue the fight, because it's been such a demoralizing experience as well, and just complete ostracization from my former colleagues and coworkers. And So yeah, it's been demoralizing, but next steps, just going to try to figure out what that is, and I still don't know what that will be or what it is right now, but things are looking up, and I hope that continues to be the case.
Well, keep the faith, because God does have a plan and he sees everything. And he's watching over you
Yes,
and
he
your
does.
family. Well, God bless you, former Special Agent Garrett Boyle, for your bravery and your service to this country. You're an inspiration, and you've been a great leader to so many. And I hope others can take some courage, from your position and what you've been able to do, and using your voice in such a positive way. That is truly a gift that you've given so many people that have been able to listen to you and to hear your testimony and see your path. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for saying so. That's humbling to hear, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. And God bless you and your family.
Thank you.
And be sure to like and subscribe down below so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed compelling interviews like that with important people in American political history willing to put it all on the line. And I want to make sure that I thank our brave sponsors that allow me to bring you these interviews that make this show possible. Sponsors like Patriot Mobile. Because with Patriot Mobile, you put America first with every call that you make, all while getting the same nationwide coverage as major carriers. And not only does Patriot Mobile provide you dependable wireless service at an affordable price, they also share your values, and they actually support you. Patriot Mobile puts their dollars into action, donating a portion of every dollar to support groups that fight for the First Amendment, the sanctity of life, and protecting our brave police and first responders. So please, support companies who support you. Patriot Mobile, mobilizing freedom and supporting you. For free activation, go to patriotmobile.com/Kimberly. Again, for free activation, that's patriotmobile.com/Kimberly. And I also want to bring you a special message from Patriot Lifestyle, where you can save more and spend less on a whole host of different benefits, from non-insurance healthcare benefits to savings on travel, identity theft, legal services, and even pet care. Take a look. Kimberly Guilfoyle. We've commissioned a lifestyle benefit program for our America First Patriots, Patriot Lifestyle. This program includes identity theft protection. And as a former prosecutor, I know that identity theft is the fastest growing crime in America. You also have free and discounted legal services, roadside assistance, travel discounts, cashback rewards while shopping on the internet, and our newest service, Pet Assure. Right, Mario and Luigi? Where you receive discounts at veterinarians across the country and pet supply stores. Patriot Lifestyle covers you, your family, and your furry friends for less than $1 a day. Follow the link and please sign up to get your Patriot Lifestyle started. And stay tuned for even more major updates on all the Patriot Lifestyle programs. It's an extraordinary value and will greatly improve your life. Now remember, everything we talk about on this show, whether it's Russiagate, abuse of power inside the FBI, crime in major cities, it's not just government scandals. Too often, it's also a media scandal. The media parroted Russia, Russia, Russia for 4 long years. They spewed lies and innuendo from their sources inside the security state without scrutiny, even as the collusion narrative crumbled, and in the process lost the trust of the American people. And the worst part? The media's actions don't just affect those inside Washington or inside a particular government agency. This media malpractice also hurts everyday, hard-working American people, because we're also highlighting a troubling story out of New York, where a pregnant New York City hospital employee was placed on leave after a video went viral of this exchange outside of Bellevue Hospital at a city bike station.
No. I said no. I said sit down.
Please help.
She's just crying.
You're not crying.
I got your video.
I'm drunk.
Wait, you.
So that is a pregnant physician assistant just getting off a 12-hour shift. She rented a bike, but was confronted by a group of men who said the bike was theirs. And rather than stick to the facts, the media ran with the story to paint a false picture and false narrative of some sort of racially motivated dispute. For example, NBC News wrote, quote, "A New York City hospital employee has been placed on leave after a viral video that appeared to show her attempting to take a rental bike from a group of young black men garnered millions of views." But that turned out to be misleading at best and defamatory at worst. The woman, identified as Sarah Comrie, produced receipts which have been corroborated, showing that she paid for the bike and that it was actually taken from her. But because the video went viral and was falsely portrayed by major news outlets, she now finds herself wondering if she'll ever get her job back and fearing for her safety to even go out in public. It's just another example of the danger of rushing to judgment and the danger of putting the narrative above and ahead of the facts. Joining us now, again, pleasure to have him on the program, Steve Krakauer. He's a media critic, author of the book Uncovered: How the Media Got Cozy with Power, Abandoned Its Principles, and Lost the People. Thank you so much for being on the program. Your resume is long and extensive, also former executive at CNN. But I got to tell you, when I saw this video, we right away were like, we've got to get Steve to comment on this, because we keep seeing the same examples of this media malpractice over and over again. I want to get your reaction to this viral video about this bike dispute. It just seems to me to be a reflection and a microcosm of just sort of larger dynamics at play here that we keep seeing in the media.
It is 100%. I completely agree. You know, this is the kind of thing where I can understand the Benjamin Crumps of the world, you know, the activists getting on board, rushing to judgment, going along with their preferred narratives when we see the viral video like this. But for the corporate media themselves, the NBC Newses of the world and many, many others, or even the journalists themselves, the individuals using their Twitter account, which is, of course, where they share everything these days, to immediately condemn this person without knowing any facts. This is what we call glance journalism. I've written about it before. You go to Jussie Smollett, all right on down, the Covington High School student, story after story. The original narrative turns out to be false, and then, of course, eventually gets corrected, sort of, but that never gets as much attention. And everyone, for the most part, when it comes to the audience, has moved on to the next thing. It is so embarrassing and so really damaging to the credibility of the journalism industry, and they yet continue to do it over and over again, even, in my opinion, knowing that this is the case.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I love that. You say it's like glance journalism. And so you see it, and then they have the reaction to it, and it's miles down the road before there is any correction of the actual facts. And the false facts are permeated and literally passed across the whole internet and media. Lazy journalism. People repeat the same thing without even investigating the facts, and they play it over and over again. And now this woman's life hangs in the balance. A pregnant woman now not able to have her job, afraid for her safety. You have these thugs, these guys trying to take the bike, because guess what? She's paid for it. She has the receipt. So if anything happens to that bike, it traces back to who? To her. I mean, I know this as a prosecutor, but she's been, vilified and essentially called, a Karen and a racist and everything. It's very disturbing to me. Because, this is what produced, like you said, Jussie Smollett and Nicholas Sandmann, with the Covington Catholic school kids.
And it tears apart the country in an unnecessary way. And you said laziness. I think that's absolutely right. I think it's laziness and it's cowardice. Because the other thing that I think is important to understand here is, let's just play this out. Let's say an NBC News or NBC News journalist said, you know what, we need to really investigate this. Maybe it wasn't her who was at fault. They would be pilloried by the Twitter crowd. They would be called out for, oh, how dare you dispute the story? What are you, a racist? They would be, so for them, they would say, We'll put it out there. We won't get yelled at on Twitter. It's better than having to get the story wrong and correct it later. They think that, and that is just so damaging. And it really shows that they are cowards, because instead of standing by their principles, they're nervous about the backlash that they might get in the moment on Twitter.
It's so true. They're so damn thirsty for clickbait. They want to just get the headlines. They want you to click on the video. They want you to go with this narrative so that they can get that out, and they don't care. There is no morality or ethics whatsoever about getting it right. getting the story right. Even if they issue a correction later, it's some small little correction buried in a paper or buried online, and the damage, is done. That's why I think it's important that these people be, held accountable, like Nicholas Sandman, the Covington kids were able to eventually get their justice, but at what cost? And at what price and at what length of time that passes in the meantime, where people are, demonized and canceled and their life, destroyed.
Yeah, and I do think that it goes beyond just what it does to the individual. I mean, it's horrible what happened to this woman, Nick Sandman, et cetera. But it goes beyond that. It really goes to hurting the country. I write about and uncovered the Pulse nightclub shooting, which I think everyone remembers. This was during the Trump administration. It was a horrible mass shooting that took place at a gay nightclub in Orlando. And the reporting about that was that it was this anti-gay homophobic attack. And what we found out many years later, thanks to some reporting by actual good journalists, is that the man who did this, Omar Mateen, was an Islamic terrorist. He went into this nightclub and asked the bouncer where all the women were. He thought it was a straight nightclub. He wasn't there to kill a bunch of gay people. He was there to kill a bunch of Americans. And yet we are left with this impression that we are this homophobic country because of this attack. And that is really damaging to the country. It continues to tear us apart, whether it's race, whether it's sexual identity. We see these stories, and it's the media coverage of it, the false media coverage of it, that really works to do these sorts of, tearing at the country.
That's really true. Whether it's like Russiagate or it's a dispute on a city street over a city bike like we saw, there really is, though, this constant, rush to judgment. I mean, is it financial as well? They just want to get out there, get the clicks, get the information. They don't care at what cost.
Yeah, I think that there's absolutely a financial incentive to it.
And ideological, I guess, as well.
Yes, of course. It only goes one direction. They never get things wrong in the other direction. That never happens. So it is that. But look, it's laziness also. I mean, how many of these stories were just essentially rewrites, aggregation of an original story that got it wrong. And then, of course, 50 other people just go along with it because, well, we've got to get our clicks too. And if one person is doing it and, this story is trending on Twitter, okay, quick, write a paragraph. And then you put it out there and you don't even understand what you're putting out because you haven't actually investigated it yourself or even stop to think about it for a second. What are we actually looking at? Can we actually just step back for a second, an hour, and think about this? No, it doesn't happen. Editors, reporters, they just hit publish and move on.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's why there has to be a disincentive for this kind of behavior. And people have to sue and use the legal system to hold, journalists and people, accountable for their malfeasance, quite frankly. But I want to talk about your book as well, because your book focuses a lot on how the media now acts, as a mouthpiece, essentially, for those in power. It really is. It's like the marketing PR arm for so many of these, twisted, decrepit, corrupt agencies, etc. And we're seeing it playing out with how they're covering the FBI, quite frankly, in the whistleblower story like Garrett O'Boyle that we had on. Whatever happened to being a check on power? When I was in school growing up, it was of the checks and balances, and being a journalist like I have worked in for many years, you actually cared about getting to the bottom, to the root of a story.
Yeah, I write a lot about Uncovered that I think there are so many other biases at play besides a political bias, which I think is what we know a lot of. But I have to say, the more I think about it, the more political bias really does play into these sorts of stories. I think about during the Trump years, the whole thing, the anonymous, the column by Anonymous that was in the New York Times. There was this anonymous whistleblower, inside, and they were is it Mike Pence? Is it Nikki Haley? And it was like some no-name guy that I happen to remember. This guy named Miles Taylor. He had some small position there. No one else remembers this person's name because he's so irrelevant. But by playing him up as this big whistleblower, he becomes this big story. They don't care if it didn't turn out to be true or if it didn't turn out to be an actual important person who has any sort of insight into the administration. No, it's just a whistleblower. We must protect this.
Oh, yeah. They milked it all the way. They just let it have legs all the way, and then everyone's like, who was it? Who was it? And it turns out to be who? The guy that cleaned the aquarium or something.
Right. I mean, a no-name, a guy who's completely disappeared, tried to make a name for himself by putting his name out there and writing a book, and it didn't go anywhere. So it really does just total hypocrisy between who is in the Oval Office, what sort of whistleblowing you're doing. If you're going to do it during one administration, the same kind of person who does the same sort of thing the next administration during these Biden years, it's treated completely differently. Even the guy Jack Teixeira, who leaked some of the information about Ukraine and some of the other, could completely. He was essentially exposed. The journalism world worked as feds essentially working in tandem with the FBI to expose this person. Where does that come from? Where is that instinct? Didn't see that during the last administration. So I do think that there is a total political bias here, and it does also stem from a distrust in the American public. Because if you're going to have the principles no matter where you might get some backlash from certain people on Twitter. Have the principles no matter who's in power when it comes to people being whistleblowers and exposing true, actual things that are out there.
Yeah, because it's not just the governmental agencies, it's our media and journalism institutions that need to really be revamped, as well. And there seems to be, consistently a thread through this, which is the idea that the narrative is more important than the actual facts. The narrative that they are so invested in putting out there to manipulate the American people and the public into believing and seeing it through their prism, the way they want you to actually interpret it and determine what went on, versus looking at the facts. We saw this with Russiagate. It wasn't about whether it was true, but whether it could feed the beast and hype the collusion narrative, and that Trump was finished, and that he engaged in this and tried to, invalidate his presidency, his character, his reputation, and whether or not people thought he had legs going forward to be able to survive it.
Yeah, I think that a perfect distillation of this is the post-Durham report fallout, which in a just media world, they would look at that report and feel absolute shame and feel that they might, the group of people besides the FBI, who were most implicated in that report was the media, the people that spun on behalf of these Democratic politicians and others who were, the deep state, essentially. People that are former CIA, former FBI, who work in many instances at these news organizations now as contributors. They were completely spun, and they should be so embarrassed and so apologetic to their audience for getting this wrong. And yet, we see bits and pieces of, this actually, no, they need a full accounting of this on the air, on every channel, and in every newspaper. And instead we see the complete opposite, because I think that they know deep down that they got this one so completely wrong, but it was in deference to the narrative. That's why they did it, because it fed a narrative that they already had spun for 5+ years. So they had to continue it, and they have to continue it to this day while Donald Trump runs again.
Yeah, and more broadly, so what do you see as sort of the future for these establishment outlets, whether it's cable news or broadcast news stations or even, print journalism? What trajectory are they on at this point?
Kimberly, it's been really interesting to watch the decline in ratings, not just at places like CNN and MSNBC, but also places like Fox News these days.
Yep.
And I think the clear, what we're seeing what's happening in all these places, I think has some clear through line, and that is that anytime a network goes more towards the establishment, more towards power, they lose viewership. And I think the reason is because there is so much more choice out there these days. There is so much more independent media.
Like this,
Exactly, on places like Rumble, Podcast World, YouTube, anywhere you go, there's so much more choice, and there's so much more ability to find people talking truth and respecting their audience. And I would hope,
and I think
as someone
quality, Steve, quite frankly. When you see shows like I'm doing, like Don Jr., like Megyn Kelly, Bongino, people out there actually really putting a tremendous amount of effort in and respecting the fact that people have choices in what they want to watch, but we want to make sure that we're doing the best show that is the most accurate and talking about the things that the people are afraid to talk about or are so censored because we're not afraid to, get canceled. It's like you almost have to just own your own island in terms of your journalistic space, because if you're with one of these corrupt, essentially, institutions that are establishment journalism, you can't do, in many cases, an honest day's work.
Yeah, there's so many layers at these organizations. Like I worked at CNN, I worked at also
Sure.
NBC and Fox. And there's lots of good people at these organizations,
There
but
are.
it is so full of layers and VPs and EVPs and SVPs. You can't get anything of substance done in a lot of these places because of that. And the only thing that I would say is someone who doesn't want to destroy all of corporate media, I think we need some institutional media that is well funded and can really speak truth to power. I hope they see where this is going. If they really start to be fearful that the audience is leaving, they have to look at these places that are independent media and say, what are they doing that we're not doing, and start to learn some lessons. Because right now they are not doing that. But I do think once it hurts the bottom line, they're going to be forced to make some tough decisions and hopefully go back towards the audience that's been completely driving them, away and going to other places.
Well, we see with Fox News with the ratings and the decline and the catastrophic mistake, calculated decision, but very grave error to Tucker Carlson, the ratings impact that it's taken. And then now you see the stories around last week of Fox letting go as many of 70 people, investigative unit that were all the journalists were. It's just disturbing, and I'm curious, someone like yourself who, like you said, you've been on the inside, whether it was, NBC or Fox News or CNN. And when you watch something like cable news, what sticks out to you? I mean, do you see what you determine are the flaws in the current formats? Do you see a disconnect between management and the audience? What would you do to restore that trust or to fix, these programs? What needs to happen if you were in charge of an overhaul? If they said, Stephen, go take over CNN today or go take over Fox News.
Wow, what a tall task, but I would take it on, even though I don't know if I would last very long, because I feel like I would make some
try to do the right thing.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I look at something like what's happening at CNN right now. Chris Licht, who's there now, and look, I think CNN is slowly making some changes. But you saw the reaction to that town hall; it's still going on. I can say internally, just complete meltdown happening there. And why is that? It's because it isn't currently full after the Jeff Zucker era. And I worked with Jeff. I like Jeff, but he has now installed a group of people who don't understand what journalism is anymore. And those people, maybe some of them can be taught and retaught what journalism is, but a lot of them can't, and they will have to go if you want to make this a news organization again. You need to actually get people in there that are doing the work of journalism and are not afraid of the Twitter crowd. But also what I would say, and this is what Fox is learning after Tucker, is you need people that are on the air that say things that are unexpected, that are surprising, that are not just towing the party line, no matter what party line that is. That you need interesting content out there, and we are in a glut of that when it comes to cable news, because a lot of it is just so watered down, and there are so many choices that we talked about. So I would try to get interesting, unique voices out there, and I would try to, on the other end of the spectrum, fill my newsroom with people that frankly don't have Twitter. That would be ideal, but certainly don't care about getting backlash from their online friends, and have a little bit of a backbone and to really stand strong for what they believe in.
Oh, it's really true. So, I like to be hope springs eternal to, restore that, trust in these, institutions. And I do believe as well that there should be some, network and establishment media, et cetera. But I believe in freedom of speech and expression and people being able to put their viewpoints out there in the marketplace, of ideas. I think it's incredibly and crucially important. But you've seen, more and more, so many, big names and television, or what we've known in broadcast news, coming out there and doing their own thing like we're doing, to make sure that we can be true and honest to ourselves and to the people out there watching to get that information out. Because at the end of the day, they're not going to take me off of here because, this is my spot. This is the deal. Rumble doesn't work that way. And some of these other podcasts as well. And so we have people who are Democrats or libertarians or independents or, conservatives on there. And I like it like that. We don't want to all just be beating the same drum. Let's get those ideas out there. And not have people be fearful of being canceled, because of Twitter backlash or bots, et cetera. Let's see what happens. I know what your opinion about the new CEO, by the way, of Twitter. What do you think of that situation and the decision that Elon Musk made?
Yeah, Linda Yaccarino came in from NBC News on the ad sale side. I always view a judge these days of something that is probably the right direction when a person or a decision is getting attacked by both sides. I would say the activists on both sides, which is what's happening with the current CEO. I think that could be a good sign. Ultimately, I think the breakdown is that that this is a person who's going to focus on the business. And Elon Musk is going to focus on ensuring that it remains a free speech platform on the editorial side and on the technology. Now, the technology, put that aside. If this person, who's the new CEO, Linda Yaccarino, if she can stay away from the areas where Elon is making it into that a free speech platform, is not going to touch that, and is just going to focus on the business, I think it'll work out fine. If she starts to veer towards that territory and infringes on where the real progress that I would say Elon has made, I think there's still actually a ways to go when it comes to Twitter. I like the freedom on places like Rumble better than Twitter at this point, although I think it's going in the right direction. Then I think that she's going to be getting in trouble if she starts to infringe on that.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. That's why I love to ask you all of these questions all the time. I'm like, what would Steve Krakauer say about this? Give us our pitch, too, for your book, where everybody can get it, which I think is a fantastic book. It's definitely, especially in this day and age, it's a must-read, I think.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, readuncover.com, readuncover.com. I would just say also one of the worst things about the media is all the anonymous sources. So there are 26 on-the-record interviews in the book with people like Tucker Carlson and many others. Everyone is on the record, so you can actually put a person to what they're saying, and no one's just smearing anybody as a
Totally.
TV insider.
Yeah, anonymous sources say. We have an anonymous source said. That's one of my favorites. But you're the best. You're definitely one of my favorites for sure. Thank you so much, Steve, for being on the program. And we
Thanks,
really
Kimberly.
appreciate you coming on. See you again soon, my friend. Thank you.
Anytime.
All right, and my closing remarks just ahead. But first, I want to thank another one of our brave sponsors that makes this show and shows like Don Jr.'s possible. That is Goldco. Because gold and silver can protect your retirement savings from inflation, from dollar devaluation. I mean, look, let's be honest. We all see the economic warning signs. We see banks collapsing. We see reckless spending. And I want you to be ready. I'm ready. Are you ready? Because with Goldco, you can roll over your 401k or your IRA into precious metals and safeguard your savings, and you can do it tax and penalty free. So from precious metals, IRAs to direct purchases of gold and silver, Goldco has helped thousands of Americans diversify and protect their retirement savings. So go to kimsmetals.com to learn more. That's kimsmetals.com to learn more. And in closing today, the pursuit for accountability and justice comes at a steep and grave cost. Because when real whistleblowers come forward, the abuse, the smears, and the character assassinations become louder and louder. It's why stories like the ones we've told you today are so important, and why standing with those who are willing to put themselves in harm's way is more important than ever. It's about courage. And without the support from American patriots like you, convincing more whistleblowers to come forward, it becomes all that much more challenging. Change doesn't always happen naturally, and it rarely comes smoothly, because too often those with the power to enact the change are the same ones who are committed to the status quo and committed to business as usual. Whether it's abuse of power inside the FBI or the media smearing an everyday hospital worker, we must demand accountability in every facet of our lives. And it will continue to be a major theme of this show, here on Rumble, where we reject the false narrative and we always seek the truth. So be sure to like and subscribe to my channel at Kimberly Guilfoyle and turn on notifications, download the Rumble app, hit the like button, and tell all of your friends so they know exactly where to find us. And also be sure to follow me and Don Jr. across all platforms: Twitter, Truth Social, Facebook, and Instagram. And please don't miss Don Jr.'s big show. It's going to be huge tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern, live with Congressman Andrew Clyde. It's fantastic, and you don't want to miss it, just in under 1 hour tonight. And in the meantime, hop on over to Locals for a few minutes at kimberly.locals.com for a live Q&A with yours truly. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and I look forward to seeing you all on Thursday.